Hey everybody, it's Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to episode 1 of The Wolf of the Grand Exchange. This is basically a recreation of my recent road to 100 mil, but this time we are only going to be flipping. I'd hardly call this a series. This is going to be a mini series of me getting to 100 mil. It'll be very quick, and as you can see, I'm not starting from scratch. This time I'll be starting with 1K, and I have this bond because I will be using bonds to keep up my membership, so along the way I do plan on buying some other bonds. Let's get right into it. While I get the series started, I figure I should explain what exactly I'm going to be doing in this series other than just flipping to 100 mil. The first big thing I would like to say that this is not necessarily a guide to flipping and a guide on how to flip to 100 mil. I won't necessarily be doing it the smartest and quickest way. I'm not a professional at flipping by any means. I know what I'm doing, and I'm figuring by the time I make 100 mil, I'll probably be getting better at it, but not all of my methods are generally suggested because I'm really just trying it out. This is more of a challenge for me. I do have a beginner's flipping guide to discuss to anybody how flipping works and at least give you the basic idea of it and all of the information that I have starting this series. Another thing that I would like to mention is that these episodes are all pre-recorded, so by the time you are seeing this first episode, I have already made it through all of the 10 episodes that I plan on making, and I have the 100 mils. So the biggest deal with that is if you have any tips and pointers, please go ahead and give them in the comments section, but realize that I will not be able to use any of these tips and pointers because by the time I get them, I will already be done flipping to 100 mil. And the last thing I would like to say before I start discussing what I'm doing on screen right now is just a quick shout out to General Steels because he helped me out with naming the series. The reason I start at 1K instead of 1GP is purely because of my inexperience at flipping. I kind of know what I'm doing, but starting at 1GP really wouldn't have worked out too well for me, I'm believing. So honestly, the challenge was still there with just 1K. I almost went with 1GP, but I decided to give myself a little bit of a handicap when we started. I will be using the OS Buddy exchange for some of my prices when I'm trying to flip. I'll also sometimes be just doing the old buy and sell trick to see what the current prices are. I'll be doing a mix of both, and eventually if I start to like one more than the other, I'll probably stick to that. But right now, if you see me go and just kind of type in a random price for an item, it's because I'm looking at the OS Buddy exchange. As you can see, I start off with, a handful of cheap items under 1K clearly, and none of them worked off too good at the start. I had iron met helms that were buying really quickly, but then I had trouble selling them. I also got a couple of bronze axes to buy, but I ended up having trouble selling those too. The item that really got me going is up in the corner right now, those snakeskin boots. They started to buy and sell fairly quickly. It wasn't a huge profit per, but it was like 30 coins each time, which starting at 1K, that was actually a decent enough percentage that I was figuring if I could start selling like 4 or 5 of them, then we'll start to make a decent profit from there. So I started upping that a little bit. As I made more profit from them, I was able to start buying more. I also went over to Guam Leafs because I like to use materials for flipping. I'm a lot better at flipping lower priced items and a high quantity of them. I don't have much experience with flipping expensive items quite yet, though I'm going to have to get to that point if I want to make 100 mil. But something like Guam Leafs is a really cheap material that would be traded a fair amount. I mean, it's not like a lot of people need Guams, but a lot more people need Guam Leafs than they need iron med helms. So that was something I definitely tried that ends up working out. As you can see, I got a few of them to sell here, and 20 of them at like 2 to 3 coin profit per is not great, but if I can do that a handful of times, it's really going to double my 1K in basically no time, which I know just making 1K profit isn't huge, but when you only had 1K to start, doubling your money, not too bad. The Guam Leafs were actually pretty solid for a while. I was making a pretty decent profit on them. It wasn't a great flip overall, just making 1 to 2 coins at times from each flip, but since I was able to flip a handful of them, it turned out to be a decent profit, just where we were for now. But honestly, it was the snakeskin boots that was getting me places. I stuck with the Guams for a while, but it didn't take too long for me to really think that the snakeskin boots are making me enough money that I really should just be focusing on them. As you can see, once I got enough money, I was able to buy 3 at a time, and eventually I was planning on going, 4, 5, 6, and eventually being able to flip a pretty good amount at one time, but that kind of took a while. I definitely was slow moving at first. Right here, I'm up to 1.8K. I've almost doubled my stack, and this was, I would say, an hour to an hour and a half worth of time, which if you had 10 mil and you almost doubled it in an hour and a half, that's not too bad, but it's kind of ugly seeing as how we're only at 2K right now, and I've been working on it for an hour. But that's all right. It's just a start. I'll say a million times in this series, I'm not too good at this right now. So the fact that it's working and I'm making some profit, that's kind of good enough for me. So hands down, the MVP so far had to be snakeskin boots. I was able to flip these things up till finally I had a few K, and I was able to buy some fairly expensive items that could actually flip for like 100, 200, maybe even like 500 coins per flip rather than 40. So I tried Bandos pages and some Mystic armor, and it worked pretty well. The Mystic gloves actually went well for quite a while. I also tried some supplies, and logs ended up being the biggest one that worked. I just got a couple of good flips in those, and I was up to 100k, so I decided to try out some other materials, starting with snakeskin. Snakeskin worked for a little bit, but it's not traded as commonly as I was expecting. I was really going for, same with the Guam as I was doing with the Guam lease, some supply that a lot of people are going to be trading, and if I could just get like 3 or 4 coins per flip, then it's no problem as long as I'm flipping a lot of them. And broad bolts seemed to do that the best. These snakeskins I probably made like 1 or 2k from, but it was the broad bolts that really started taking off and became the new MVP for me. I was making 2 to 4 coins per flip, usually 2, but occasionally I could get 4 coins in a single flip, or on a single bolt in one flip. But the biggest thing is that I started to flip like 1,000 of them at a time, so that would be 4, maybe 6k if I was really getting in there, and that's way more than what I was making before. I was doing snakeskin boots for 40 coins a piece, and 10 of them I was only making 400 coins per flip, and that just takes forever to make some money. After broad bolts stopped selling too much, I hit the limit. Let's be honest, that's what happened. I started to do some flax, which actually worked out really well. This is another thing that I probably should have thought of before I started doing snakeskins. That was probably the worst thing that I tried. I tried gold amulets for a while. They worked pretty well, but once I started hitting the limits on some of the supplies that I was doing, I really tried to branch out to some items that were worth, I don't know, a few K a piece, like those Bandos pages, and as you can see here, mithril pickaxes, but those didn't really work out too well for me right away. For a little while, I started thinking that I was crazy to try doing some expensive items, so I went back to supplies for a while, trying teak and coal and a bunch of other things, and none of them really started working. So eventually I went back to Mystic gloves, and I still tried some Bandos pages, which I tried before. Bandos pages really never worked out too well for me, but I made a couple K in the process. But these Mystic gloves I really tried to stick to for a while, being between 6 and 10k a piece. Also Mystic boots. I should just say Mystic armor. It was pretty good, like a 1 to 2k flip per flip. So if I could do 5 of them, then 5k per flip. Still not anything spectacular, but just at the beginning of this episode, we only had 1k, so it's a boost. It's working out much better than snakeskin boots, and I was pumped when we were doing those. Eventually, I went back to some supplies, though. My 4-hour buy limit, it was up, so I could buy some more broad bolts, and I immediately went back to those. Those were such a big deal in the first time, so I figured I gotta go back and try them again. I tried some iron and steel arrows for a while. I made a couple mistakes, I only did it once. I checked the prices of steel arrows, and it was like, I don't know, let's say 60 coins a piece. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But then I went and bought iron arrows for that price on accident. So I actually lost some money while testing those out. But really, the supplies were definitely the biggest thing for me. Mystic gloves worked, but these things that are traded very often, like Zulra's scales, for instance, that's really what's been working for me so far, especially with having a low cash stack. As you can see, once I'm up in the 300k range, I really started flipping some Zulra's scales. You can flip 18,000 of these every 4 hours, and you can get, sometimes you can get up to like 6 coins per scale. You could get even bigger if you're really patient, but for me, I was really testing out timings, so I was trying to do quicker flips, and I was getting I would say 3 coins per scale is a pretty good average. But sometimes if you get 6 coins per scale and you do those 18,000, clearly you can only do that every 4 hours. But 6 times 18,000 is 108,000, I believe. I'm going to check that quick. 108 divided by 6 is 18. So 108,000. Clearly that would only be 25k an hour, but that's not the only thing I'm going to do over those 4 hours. I'll probably be flipping Zulra's scales far in the future, even when I have like a lot more money than 300k. Purely because you can buy 18,000 at a time, and if I could just do a really quick flip of like 100k or 150k if I'm patient, it's still pretty helpful even if I already have like 50 mil in my stack. So Zulra's scales, it's probably on the top of my list right now. That's, I would say, the new MVP. But the real main thing I did in this episode were supplies. I kept on these cheap supplies, couple hundred coins a piece, so like ores would be something that I was checking a lot, but it really didn't work out at the beginning. Ores I felt were only like 1 to 2 coins per flip, so I wanted to be able to buy a lot at a time. These gold amulets worked out really well for a while. Of course, I had broad bolts. Once those 4 hours were up again, I tried out the broad bolts, and they just kept working out. So when I was on my way up to 1 mil, supplies were the biggest thing. Things that players would trade commonly, and you only get a few coins per flip. It's usually less risky. Not always though, because if it only changes by like 5 coins while you're trying to sell, then maybe you lose a lot of money because you have 10,000 runes or something. But other than snakeskin boots and mystic armor, maybe a couple of Bandos pages, supplies would be the moral of episode 1. That's definitely the strategy I used. And after we trade in a lot of coal and death runes, I eventually tried out some blood runes too, which worked out pretty well. Nature runes were fairly disappointing. They weren't working out too well right now, but I flipped nature runes in the past, so I will go back to them. But really, I tried my hand out with any supply I could do, and I never really made more than like 100k on a single supply at a time. Broad bolts would get fairly close. I shouldn't say that. Zora's scales I would make about 100k, but that's kind of a unique one. Zora's scales are one of the best low price flipping items out there. At this point, I probably should be at a point where I am flipping like 3 or 4 items at once, but I'm really just kind of getting to the roll of it. I'm working my way towards 1 mil. I did some overnight buying, which as you can see from this flax, that's what I did. When I went to sleep, I put up some flax for real cheap, managed to get almost 13,000 of it, and sell it back for a decent flip overall. So overnight flips are kind of a big thing. I probably could have made more from that one. As you can see, they sold really quickly. But that's where a lot of my money is going to be coming from, is the overnight stuff being a kind of a low cash stack. But this overnight one puts us just over 1 mil, or 8k over, and that is where we are going to wrap up our first episode. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 1 and got a good feel for how this series is going to work. As you can see, it's not really a guide because I'm not going too in-depth on any of my flips. It's really just me challenging myself, trying to make 100 mil from flipping. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to click on that like button and tell us what you enjoyed about it. If you're looking for some more RuneScape videos like this one, then be sure to join the cul-de-sac by subscribing for more. We will see you next time.